I had just finished the final touches on my dream property, an 85-acre ranch tucked neatly into the foothills outside a semi-suburban stretch of central Texas. It had taken nearly 2 years of blood, sweat, and slow bureaucratic battles to make it mine. A man doesn't just buy dirt and slap a fence on it and call it freedom. You've got to build into something that breathes your name. I had a red metal barn with high-vaulted rafters, a modest yet warm single-story cabin I designed myself, and, at the center of it all, my own man-made lake, fed by a creek that came rolling down from the hills like it knew where home was. I called it Whitetail Hollow. For the final cherry on top, I'd commissioned a local craftsman to build me a rustic wooden pontoon boat, just big enough for me, a couple of friends, and a cooler full of cold beer. No motors, just solar battery power and a couple paddles. She wasn't flashy, but she was mine. I named her the Loon Whisperer. It was the kind of country peace you can't buy with a city paycheck, and I figured the world would let me enjoy it in peace. I was wrong. The first sign of trouble came about a week after I floated the Loon Whisperer into the lake for her maiden voyage. It was a sunny Saturday morning. I had a Bluetooth speaker humming a little Waylon Jennings, and a rod resting in one hand while I dipped the other in the cool water. I saw a white Ford Explorer slow roll past my property line, just on the paved road that bordered the north end of the ranch. It didn't stop, didn't honk, just crept past like it was counting fence posts. I thought maybe it was a curious neighbor or a lost real estate agent checking parcels. I didn't think much of it. But the next day, an envelope showed up in my mailbox. No stamp, no return address, just bold black font, Chestnut Creek Estates Homeowners Association. I chuckled. I didn't live in Chestnut Creek. That place was a mile and a half down the road. One of those ticky-tacky housing developments where every third house was the same floor plan and every blade of grass had to be trimmed to exactly 2.25 inches. I opened it out of curiosity more than anything. Dear property owner, it began, it has come to our attention that a watercraft was observed operating on a body of water adjacent to the Chestnut Creek community. Said watercraft appears to violate community environmental and visual standards, per Article 12, Section B of the HOA Covenant Code. We respectfully request that you remove the craft and cease all aquatic recreational activity until further review. I actually laughed out loud. They wanted me to stop boating on my own lake, which existed entirely on my own property, because it offended their visual standards. I wasn't even in their jurisdiction. I didn't even want to be in their community. That's why I bought outside the HOA lines. I tossed the letter into my fire pit and thought that would be the end of it. But the HOA wasn't done. Over the next 2 weeks, I received 3 more letters, each more aggressively worded than the last. They went from request to demand, and eventually claimed I was in violation of community policy and subject to legal action, including daily fines of up to $250 per day for noncompliance. It was laughable. I hadn't signed any HOA agreement. I didn't live under their rule. But they were so confident in their own power, they assumed proximity gave them permission. Things escalated on a warm Thursday afternoon in May. I had just finished up morning chores, feeding the goats, checking the irrigation pumps, and replacing a busted hinge on the shed door when I decided to treat myself to a lazy float on the lake. I loaded a cooler with a few Lone Stars, brought a worn copy of Lonesome Dove, and set sail. I was out on the water no more than 15 minutes when I saw the flash of red and blue in the distance. At first I thought maybe someone had an accident on the road, but then I saw the cruiser roll up to my gate. I squinted against the sun. 2 sheriff's deputies stepped out and walked up like they'd been summoned. I paddled ashore and met them at the dock. "Afternoon, gentlemen," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Something I can help you with?" One of them, an older guy with a thick mustache and the calm weariness of someone who'd been doing this job too long, nodded politely. "We got a call from the Chestnut Creek HOA. Said someone was operating a watercraft without a permit. Claimed it might be a hazard or violating some codes." I blinked. "You're kidding." He gave a small shrug. Didn't sound like anything criminal, but they were persistent. Said it was a disturbance. We had to check it out. I motioned toward the lake. "That lake's entirely on my land. Built it myself. No outlet, no connection to city water. Is my private property. And that boat, I tapped the rail of a Loon Whisperer, is solar-powered, makes no noise, and doesn't dump a drop of oil. They got no jurisdiction out here. The deputy nodded. I figured, but we had to respond. Just doing due diligence. You mind if we take a look around? I was annoyed but polite. I let them walk the shoreline, showed them my land deeds, and pointed to the plat map that showed clear boundaries. After about 30 minutes, the deputies concluded what I'd already known. The HOA had no leg to stand on. Sorry to waste your time, the mustached deputy said, tipping his hat. No worries, I replied. But next time they call, you can tell them to keep their nose on their side of the fence. I thought that would put an end to it, but I underestimated how petty power can get when it feels challenged. 2 days later, I received a notice of violation stapled to a wooden stake driven into my front gate post. It wasn't just a letter now. It was a certified document, complete with HOA seals, citing multiple offenses, visual pollution, disruption of local wildlife, unauthorized water construction, and, my favorite, reckless recreation. They claimed my boat created an unsafe environment for nearby residents and children. There were no nearby residents or children. My nearest neighbor was over 600 yards away and separated by a tree line. I started to get pissed, but instead of lashing out, I got strategic. I started digging. First, I confirmed with the county recorder's office that my parcel was never, and had never been, subject to Chestnut Creek's HOA authority. Not once. Not even during its original sale decades ago. Then, I found out something even more interesting. Chestnut Creek's HOA had filed a visual buffer clause years ago that allowed them to regulate sight lines and environmental presentation only within a 200-yard radius of their own common spaces, and even that clause was limited to members only. My lake wasn't visible from their walking trails, their community center, or any of their lots unless someone deliberately left the development and drove half a mile down a public road to peek through my fence. That gave me an idea. I installed a 9-foot cedar privacy wall along the road that bordered their community. The kind with staggered paneling and treated wood stain. Legal, code-compliant, and tall enough to block any view they might have had of my lake. I added a sign to the middle that read, Private Property, no trespassing, and no HOA zone. That should have been the final nail. But Chestnut Creek wasn't backing down. That's when the HOA president, a pinched-looking woman named Darla Crenshaw, came onto my property uninvited one morning and snapped photos through a gap in the gate while I was out fishing. I only found out because I checked my security cam footage that night and saw her ducking behind her Lexus SUV like she was staging a covert op. That crossed a line. I called the sheriff and filed a report for trespassing. The deputy said they'd have a talk with her, but I knew that wouldn't stop her for long. She sent another letter a few days later, this time claiming she would escalate to the community's environmental legal board. She attached a formal-sounding document about riparian rights, implying that my lake affected shared water access. I knew it was garbage. My lake had no inlet or outlet to any water source in the community. It was self-contained, but it told me something important. The HOA was playing defense now. They were guessing, firing off legal-sounding darts hoping something would stick. I decided it was time to go on offense. I started looking into Chestnut Creek's own policies, their budget, their voting structure, and, most importantly, their assets. And that's when I found their Achilles heel. They had a community marina, a rickety little man-made pond on the far edge of their development, no more than half an acre, with a couple of rental kayaks and a glorified gazebo. It had been grandfathered in under some municipal agreement years ago, but it wasn't owned by the HOA. It was leased from a third-party investment company that didn't live anywhere near Chestnut Creek, and it was for sale. Once I discovered that Chestnut Creek's community marina wasn't owned by the HOA, but leased from a holding company called Fairbrook Capital Assets, LLC, I knew I had leverage. I dug into the tax records, then ran a search on the property's zoning history. The HOA had been leasing it on a rolling 5-year contract that was set to expire in 8 months, with a renewal clause that wasn't automatic. Even better, Fairbrook had recently bundled it in a quiet sale of miscellaneous, non-core assets to make room for more profitable suburban expansions elsewhere in the county. Long story short, It was for sale, but not publicly listed. No signs, no open bidding. You had to know the right people, or be the right kind of buyer. I called the number on the transfer documents and got routed to a sleepy acquisitions manager named, who answered like he wasn't used to speaking with actual humans. I introduced myself as a local landowner with interest in recreational real estate assets and offered to buy the marina, sight unseen, if the price was right. Will paused, asked a few bland questions, and by the next Tuesday, I was on a Zoom call with his boss, a slick type named Jeremy, who tried to throw out terms like Q4 realignment and low-use divestment. I played dumb, just a country rancher trying to expand my land holdings, and asked what kind of number would make them let go of the marina today. They wanted $112,000. I offered $80,000 and said I could wire it that week. After some posturing and silence, they countered with $90,000, and I didn't even blink. Deal. I drew up the purchase agreement through my attorney, and within 10 days, I owned Chestnut Creek's precious marina. It was a delicious kind of irony. For weeks, they tried to get me to remove a boat from my own lake, claiming it violated the spirit of the community. Now I owned their only sanctioned recreational water access. I had the deed in hand, the keys to the tiny kayak shed, and more importantly, the full legal right to terminate the lease with 30 days' notice or rewrite it under my own terms. I didn't say anything to the HOA at first. I let it simmer. Quiet power makes the best reveal. Instead, I visited the marina the following weekend to see what I'd bought. It was worse than I imagined. A cracked cement slab pretending to be a boat launch, 3 rusting paddle boats locked with cheap chains, and a green-tinged duck pond that hadn't been properly dredged in years. But people still used it. A handful of families were gathered at the gazebo when I arrived. Some kids were throwing bread to ducks. One teenager was fishing with a Zebco reel off the edge of the dock. A few dads were drinking energy drinks and talking about lawnmower brands like they were discussing sports teams. I said nothing, just observed. This was their oasis, their version of lake life. It was a small place, but clearly meant something to them. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just revenge. This was an opportunity. So I went to work. Within a week, I hired a landscaping crew to evaluate the soil integrity and assess sediment issues. They showed up in bright neon vests and hard hats, making it look very official. I posted temporary closure signs at the entrance. Under evaluation, public access suspended temporarily, owner inspection ongoing. You'd have thought I shut down a water park. The HOA's email lit up with complaints. One woman even posted on the Nextdoor app saying some stranger has shut our lake down. I let the rumors brew for 3 days. Then I sent the email. 2. Chestnut Creek, HOA Board. From Russell Tate, owner, Marina Parcel 28B. Subject, Lease Update, Marina Closure. Dear board members, effective immediately, I am suspending public access to Parcel 28B, formerly leased under the Chestnut Creek HOA agreement as a community marina. As the new property owner, I have reviewed the current lease terms and determined they are not consistent with the operational, liability, and insurance standards required for sustained public use. You are welcome to enter negotiations for a revised lease agreement under new terms and fee structure. Please be advised that failure to respond within 14 days will result in permanent closure and reallocation of use rights for the parcel. Respectfully, Russell Tate, Whitetail Hollow Holdings, LLC. The board went ballistic. I got a frantic call from Darla Crenshaw herself 2 hours later. She went from fake cordial to passive-aggressively threatening in the span of a single breath. You can't just take our marina, she snapped. You leased it, I replied calmly. Now I own it. You're welcome to rent it from me. At market rates. Her voice was a perfect mix of horror and disbelief. You're doing this out of spite, aren't you? Over a stupid boat. I smiled even though she couldn't see me. No, ma'am. I'm doing this to protect my recreational property rights. Just like you tried to do. She hung up. The next HOA board meeting was a circus. They held an emergency vote, and I know this because someone leaked the minutes to me. Bless you, anonymous neighbor. Some members wanted to fight back legally. Others wanted to sue the holding company for selling it. And one guy, Greg, I think, suggested they just give the man whatever lease he wants so we don't lose it completely. I like Greg. In the meantime, I decided to make a few enhancements to the marina. First, I drained part of the pond, had it dredged, and ordered a floating dock replacement that would take 3 months to install. Second, I updated the lease fee. If they wanted to continue using the space, they'd pay $2,500 a month, up from the $300 they'd been getting before. That fee covered increased insurance liabilities, maintenance, operational flexibility, and owner oversight. It also included a clause that prohibited any complaint, commentary, or legal challenge to any recreational activity occurring within a 1-mile radius of the marina, effectively barring them from ever coming after my ranch lake again. Of course, they balked. For 3 weeks, I heard nothing. The board tried to wait me out, assuming I'd fold or reduce the rate. Instead, I doubled down. I posted a new sign on the marina gate. Private Members Club. Access by invitation only. Members enjoy priority water rights, free boat storage, and event privileges. And I invited everyone except HOA board members. I put flyers in mailboxes on the outskirts of the community, targeted those who had clearly been sick of the HOA's overreach for years. People with bird feeders too close to the sidewalk. People who got warning letters for leaving trash cans out a day late. I found those people, shook their hands, and gave them free seasonal passes to the new Chestnut Creek Freedom Marina. I even hosted a Saturday barbecue with smoked brisket and live music right there by the gazebo. Folks came out in lawn chairs and drank cold beer, while Darla watched from the other side of the fence like she'd just witnessed her kingdom being sold for a plate of ribs. The HOA called an emergency vote to explore legal recourse. But there was none. I owned it. The county confirmed it. The lease was expired. No foul, no recourse. They were left with no marina and no power over me. But I wasn't done yet. As a final touch, I installed a giant wooden sign on the floating dock, facing the direction of Chestnut Creek's main walking path. It read, "If you can see this, you're not in charge here. Love, the ranch guy." And below that, carved into the dock rail, the Loon Whisperer was here. Owning their marina was a checkmate move, but I wasn't interested in just winning a round. I wanted to break the entire chessboard they'd been playing on. I figured if the HOA could treat someone like me, who wasn't even under their jurisdiction, with such bold harassment, what were they doing to the people who actually were part of their domain? That thought lingered as I sat by my own lake one evening. The Loon Whisperer tied gently to the dock, a soft orange sunset pouring down the ridge line like liquid fire. I knew I'd embarrassed them, but justice felt better when it was shared. So I decided to do something a little civic-minded. I'd make my victory count for everyone they ever strong-armed with lawn fines, garden gnome citations, or driveway oil stain warnings. I would dig deep and expose the rot from the inside. The first step was research. I attended an open Chestnut Creek HOA meeting purely as a concerned marina owner. I wore a plaid shirt, a clean pair of jeans, and kept my hat in my lap. Sat in the back row and watched the machine sputter and grind in person. Darla Crenshaw presided like a self-declared queen, clutching a leather-bound folder full of violation reports. Her inner circle nodded at every suggestion like bobbleheads on a bumpy road. The conversation wasn't about community improvement. It was about control. They discussed regulating American flag sizes, issuing warnings for excessively loud bird feeders, and fining someone for placing a basketball hoop too close to a street lamp. You could feel the tension in the room, not just from the board, but from the residents. They were tired. Afterward, I struck up quiet conversations with a few homeowners by the cookie table. I introduced myself as the guy who owns the marina now, and that was all it took. They leaned in like I was holding a flashlight in the dark. Did they really try to control your lake? You're not even in the HOA, right? And they still called the cops. Man, you should have seen what they did to old Mrs. Pennington last year. All she did was put a rocking chair on her porch. Stories poured out. Everything from late fees issued for decorative stones to threats of liens for slightly faded garage doors. I realized there was a silent, seething majority in Chestnut Creek, one that just needed the right push to start pushing back. So I gave it to them. I built a website called nomorecreekcontrol.com. Simple, clean, Nothing flashy, just a place where residents could submit anonymous stories about HOA abuse. I built it under a dummy LLC, so it couldn't be tied back to me directly. The homepage read, "Have you been fined for things that don't matter? Harassed for how you live on your property? You're not alone. Share your story, stay anonymous, and let's take our neighborhood back." Within 2 weeks, over 130 submissions rolled in. I read them all. One man had been fined $50 for leaving a step ladder visible in his garage with the door open. A family was cited for planting tomatoes in the front yard, a violation of ornamental uniformity. One woman was brought to tears because she'd received 5 citations in 1 week, each for different color tone mismatches between her blinds and shutters. That was it. I knew what had to happen. I helped them organize. Using a quiet network of community advocates I met through the site, I helped them form an informal coalition, Chestnut Creek Homeowners for Autonomy, CCHA. We met at my ranch once a week, a dozen at first, then 30, then over 70 residents. We strategized. We looked at their bylaws. I even brought in a property attorney buddy of mine from Austin who reviewed the HOA's charter. He smiled when he saw the paperwork. "You know," he said, "if they lose a quorum of elected board members or fail to conduct legally compliant elections within a set window, the HOA charter becomes unenforceable. All you need is a recall election, and if they bungle that, it collapses under its own weight." That became the plan. Over the next month, CCHA gathered signatures from 63% of the neighborhood, far above the 50% threshold required to initiate a board recall vote. We hand-delivered the petition at the next HOA meeting. Darla tried to stall it, claiming procedural errors, but the numbers didn't lie. They had 21 days to hold a recall election or face a legal challenge that could trigger dissolution proceedings. They scrambled. They set a vote date, but made one crucial mistake. They tried to hold it via email rather than a formal meeting, and they failed to send ballots to 19 verified residents who were part of the CCHA group. That was a breach of both HOA charter rules and Texas state HOA regulations. We documented everything: screenshots, delivery logs, witness statements. And then, when they certified the vote as a win by claiming the recall failed, we filed suit. A full class action petition backed by dozens of homeowners, with every violation and procedural misstep included. We didn't want money. We wanted governance reform. We wanted dissolution. And in a dramatic twist, Darla Crenshaw made our job easier by resigning 2 days after the filing. She claimed health reasons, but word got around she'd received a cease and desist letter from our attorney warning her about potential perjury for false ballot certification. With the board fractured, the remaining members voted to suspend all enforcement actions until further review. That included every citation, every fine, every violation in the past 12 months. Gone. Forgiven. Chestnut Creek's HOA collapsed in less than 4 months. The community was still standing, still functioning, but now people talked to each other. Neighbors asked first instead of reporting. Lawn decorations popped up. Kids played basketball on the sidewalk. A woman planted sunflowers in her front yard, and no one batted an eye. It was imperfect, messy, alive. As for me, I kept the Marina, but I converted it. Not into a private club, not into a fishing lodge. I turned it into a public green space, no charge. Just a place for people to gather, paddle, sit by the water, and remember what freedom looks like. I even kept the sign, though I changed the wording. This space belongs to the people. Use it well. Leave it better. The Loon Whisperer still floats on my lake every Sunday, usually with a dog riding shotgun and a cooler full of Lone Stars by my feet. I've got peace again. Not just for me, but for an entire neighborhood. And all it took was a boat, a lake, and refusing to be pushed around.